Hello everyone, I welcome you to CEC lecture series. I am Nupur Chawla, teaching English literature at Maitri College, Delhi University. This lecture is the second part of the lecture which is a summing up summing up of 20th century post-war drama. Right? We have been discussing English drama in this lecture series and different trends, different playwrights, different decades were discussed while covering English drama. And this lecture is dedicated to, putting together the thoughts on plays or drama or theatre which originated or which was there around the 60s, right? So in the previous lecture we had established the historical and the literary context of these plays. Now in this lecture we are going to transition and look at some of the themes that were common to works that were written around this time. Now, first is that you see, as we were discussing that in the previous lecture as well, that one kind of plays that was being written around this time were the political plays or the theatre of the ideas. So one of the themes that was quite common to different plays was political, right? Now, what was the political aspect of these plays? Most of them were reflecting the unease of the workers with the state, right? Now, when I talk about the workers, when I talk about the state, where do these categories originate? Again, connecting back to that thread of industrialization. So once society became industrialized, production was in the form of was being done through machines. The whole system, you see, the mode of production changes. As the mode of production change, the social relations also undergo a change as well. So when I say social relations, it means that people that are involved in the process of production, those people change. So when it is feudalism, then of course we have the serf and the landlord, and the moment it is industrialization veering towards capitalism, we have the workers who are working in factories, and then we have the capitalists or the factory owners, right? Now the workers, of course, then the conditions were such because with in the industrial economy, maximizing profit was of primary concern. That a lot of times came at the cost of well-being of the people that were working. So inhuman conditions, low wages, bad working conditions, all of these were the issues that started to be reflected around this time. And the plays then did capture this reality, and of course playwrights then did take a stand, right? So they did sympathize, a lot of them sympathize with the condition of the workers, the condition of the middle class, which of course was, did not invite as much sympathy as the condition of the workers did. But in fact, it would be wrong to use the word sympathy, but I would say understanding. That these plays, they were not meant to evoke sympathy, because sympathy means that you just feel bad about somebody and you end at that. But these plays, which were politically themed, they would urge you to take action. They would share with us an understanding of the state of affairs, and on that basis share an understanding and also a vision. So this aspect of the political was quite important as one of the themes in a lot of plays written around this time. The second theme that one can say was common was the philosophical. Now you might wonder that where does philosophy come in from, because politics and philosophy, one can say, quite different. because philosophy is completely in the realm of ideas. Politics is both ideas and action. Now, the philosophical themes can be traced back to the absurdity or the theatre of the absurd movement, existentialism, and the world wars. Right? That you see, the wars had shaken up people so much that they started to rethink, they started to question the fixities, the concepts, the truths, the life truths that were taken to be as given so far, right? So whenever there is something which is of a drastic change in your life, you always tend to reflect. You always tend to step back and think about the basic structures of life. So that was exactly what was happening around this time. That is, people were, the artists were dealing with, were delving into the questions of human life and existence, and how to confront them in day-to-day life. The third theme of plays around this time was the revolutionary one. Now, when I say revolutionary, it's more of a kind of an attributive word, but in particular, when we say that these themes were discussed or explored, or revolutionary theme was discussed or explored, one means that the theme of colonization was another, a preoccupation of the artists around this time, because after the World War, this whole phenomena of the former colonies, right? So in fact, before the World War as well, a lot of the European powers had colonized different parts of the world, and that colonial reality entered a kind of a different phase after the wars. So this also came to be discussed in a lot of plays around this time. So then three themes, of course, are political, philosophical, and those pertaining to the reality of colonization, right? Now, if we talk about the fact that around this time, if we still discuss it at still more length, when I talk about the political, you see, political drama of the time had was of course the theatre of the ideas, etc., but it also posed questions about the social order. While it did sympathetically or with understanding represent the workers, it did take a stand on different issues. At the same time, the drama, which was political, it also posed questions about the social order, right? So now this drama is associated with social realism, and it represented the harsh picture of poverty and the impact of a capitalist formation. And of course, in that light, the dwindling of social and human values, among others. So all this became important for a drama that was political, right? The other theme, which was philosophical, we see that the theatre of the absurd helps one understand the philosophical themed plays. The foremost thing is, when we look at the philosophy, or what was the philosophical aspect, or how did these themes play about, let's just look at some quotes by the playwrights and understand this a bit better. Ionesco is a playwright around this time, and he says, and I quote, cut off from his religious, metaphysical, and transcendental roots, man is lost, unquote. So what do we see here? We see what Ionesco is thinking. He is thinking about a man being lost. Lost why? Because those structures which gave meaning to his existence seem to now be shaken up. What are they? One of the foremost is religion, right? So man was cut off from his religious roots and was therefore feeling lost, right? Religious transcendental roots. Transcendental, anything which is to do with a realm which is beyond your immediate reality, which is beyond this material reality. That is what is transcendental. So transcendental, as in transcend, means go beyond. So again, thinking of man feeling lost, religion being questioned. Why did religion come into question, or how did this philosophical idea come into being? It's again because during the wars, the sheer irrationality of what was happening made people question the existence of God as well, right? So from there came this reflection where man just felt lost. There was no religion to fall back on. There was no family system to fall back on. So you see, all these fixities that really give definition or meaning to our lives, they were all called into question around this time. And when such a cataclysmic, a moment arrived, people became philosophical, right? And of course, they started to veer towards observing the absurdity of life. Now, at another level, Ionesco says one more thing about this condition, and let's look at the quote. He says, "People drowning in meaninglessness can only be grotesque. Their sufferings can only appear tragic by derision," unquote. Now, over here, you see, Ionesco is reflecting on what will be the mode of representation of such plays which are engaging with such philosophical themes. The philosophical theme of absurdity, meaninglessness, lack of roots, etc. So he says that people drowning in meaninglessness can only be grotesque. Grotesque means distorted. They appear different from normal. And their sufferings can only appear tragic by derision. Now, derision is this making fun, right? Now, it is quite, if you notice, a very dark scenario where people are suffering. It's a tragic scenario, but there is derision on top of that. There is a derisive treatment of people suffering. There is a laughter at this kind of tragedy, right? So, this is what one can say kind of encompasses the absurdity and encompasses the philosophical theme which was quite popular around this time. Now, further, you see to the idea of irrationality, absurdity of life, which was portrayed through dramatic forms that reject realistic settings, logical reasoning, or a coherently evolving plot. All these were part of the theatre of the absurd. There wouldn't be a plot which would, evolve coherently. Sometimes there would be a lack of logic as well. The settings would not be realistic, etc. Right? So these were some of the common concerns of the theatre of the absurd that gave rise to philosophical themes, and thereby became an important part of theatre around this time. Now, if you look at this cartoon on your screen, now this is of course a dig at this play by Samuel Beckett, Waiting for Godot, where Godot never arrives, but this comic artist has made fun of that endless wait of people, and he's given this little quotation by Godot. So he has imagined what Godot would say to these two people who are waiting for his arrival, and we all know Godot never arrives. So the idea of endless wait, the agony of endless wait without seeing a light at the end of the tunnel is somewhat caricatured over here, and it was also an important part of the theatre of the absurd, right? Now, having looked at that little representation, so we have seen that these three were primarily the themes which were discussed or which were popular in the post-war drama. From here, now we transition to the last part of our summing up. We looked at the historical context, we looked at the literary context, we looked at some of the themes which are common to the plays written in the 20th century in the post-war period. Now we are going to look at some of the texts which were discussed in the course of these lectures on English drama, particularly post-war English drama. Now, of course, we discussed quite a few, but I've here taken some representative ones which will help you put in perspective all the ideas that we have discussed in the first part of the lecture and the initial parts of this one as well. So one of the plays that was in discussion was Tom Stoppard's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. This was written in 1966. It's an absurdist existential comedy, existential tragicomedy. Absurdist and existential, we of course know. Tragicomedy, a play which involves elements of both tragedy and comedy. So that's the genre to which Stoppard's play belongs. Now, this was essentially, a rewriting of Hamlet in modern terms in the 1960s, right? So, Hamlet, a very popular Shakespearean play written in the 16th, 17th century. If those characters appeared not in the 17th or the 16th century, but if they appeared in the 20th century, what would their concerns be like? What would their conversations look like? What would their preoccupations be? All these are explored when Stoppard rewrites Hamlet in the 1960s context. Now you see the absurdity of the play by Stoppard, one can say, is a comment on the modern condition, right? Apart from being a comment on the modern condition, there were some philosophical issues also which shine forth amidst the absurdity. The issues of death and hope, the purpose of art, anxiety of recognition, or the anxiety of audience. You see, all these are issues which come to the fore when you look at Stoppard's play Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, and this again, makes the text, actually situates the text at the center of this trend of the post-war drama. Next, of course, we also looked at Edward Albee's Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. This one was written in 1962, and we see that the elements of this play, they align with the drama belonging to the theatre of the absurd, though the play is often not associated with the movement, right? Why is it that the play is not associated with the movement? Because of course it came slightly later, but then there are quite overt absurdist elements as well. Now, what are these elements? Now, you see in the play we did discuss that there's a couple who has an imaginary son, and you see they actually do not have a child, but they imagine that they have a child. In fact, they imagine that they have a son, and they live a long part of their life imagining or living with this imaginary baby or imaginary son or imaginary child. And the play ends by the two couple, the two people, the husband and wife, telling each other that, okay, let's get over with this facade. And the imaginary son then apparently, as the playwright says, he dies. So it's a kind of in fact, they say that let's stop this game. Both of them, they do acknowledge. So you see, they are aware what they are doing, but that's, let's say, perhaps the only option that they have. So they say that let's be done with this game and face the reality. So the fact that almost the entire part of the play, they were imagining this son that was never born, and it was a kind of a play. It tells us that what the mental landscape of people, emotional landscape of people around that time really was. Then the third text that we also discussed, it was by Jean-Paul Sartre, No Exit, written in 1944. Now this one is slightly before the Second World War, Sartre, of course, is known to be a great humanist, and who's also associated with existentialism. He's a French thinker and author. We see that in No Exit there is a depiction of the afterlife in which three deceased or dead characters are punished by being locked into a room together for eternity. Now, here Sartre, focuses on afterlife. He focuses on dead people. So characters are not the real flesh and blood people, but they are dead, right? So so Sartre then is thinking about the life after death, and how it is so difficult to face oneself as viewed by the other. So it is very popularly said that Sartre's ideas about so there's a reference to Sartre's ideas about the perpetual ontological struggle of being. Ontological means the fact of existing, right? So there's a perpetual ontological struggle of being that Sartre explores, and it is caused. It actually causes one to see oneself as an object from the view of another person or another consciousness, right? So when you view yourself from the point of view of another, that is when it is eye-opening and sometimes even horrifying. And that is why the phrase hell is other people. Very, very popular phrase by Sartre. So you see, humanity around this time then was not really one that was associated with harmony and coexistence and happiness and cheer, but instead these important questions started to develop of existence, struggle, ontology, recognition, death, afterlife, meaning, and all of that, right? From there, we also discussed another very important playwright of the 20th century, John Osborne, and his text Look Back in Anger, that was written in 1956. Now, John Osborne's Look Back in Anger is a realist play, and in that discussion, we saw that it is about the life and marital struggles of an intelligent, educated, but a disaffected young man of the working class who's called Jimmy Porter. So at the center is this a man who is intelligent, who is young, educated, but he is disaffected. Disaffected meaning not very happy with the state of affairs. He has his doubts. He has his disappointments with the way reality is taking shape. And he has an equally competent but an impassive upper middle class wife, Alison. So you see, there's a very clear class difference between the two. That Jimmy Porter represents the working class and his wife represents the upper middle class. So on its own, just by means of bringing these two characters together in a kind of relationship of matrimony, the struggle between the two classes is also played out. So not only is Jimmy Porter's existence in the play a kind of a questioning of the reality which was a result of industrialization, how working class was feeling disillusioned, there was no sense to hold on to, etc. At the same time, there was this clash between these two sets of people as well. And you see, this in fact led to the popularization of the term angry young men, right? In fact, this phrase has also been transported to Hindi cinema as well. Angry young man, which is used to describe one of these actors in a film, but originally it was used for so this phenomena of angry young man actually came in John Osborne's play. And who was the angry young man over here? Jimmy Porter, who was not happy with the social conditions, with the political conditions, with overall environment of being, and that's what made him angry. Made him angry with the different classes, right? The privileged ones. He was angry about that sense of divide between those who had resources and who were privileged in that sense, and the ones that were still struggling and working hard. So multiple issues play onto Jimmy Porter's mind, which make him an angry young man. And in fact, Osborne had used this phrase to describe his entire generation, who employed harshness of realism in the theatre in contrast to the escapist theatre that characterized the previous generations. So Osborne had, in creating this prototype, he automatically gets associated with realism in theatre instead of those musical comedies that, or one can say not even musical comedies, but other plays that came before the 60s, and how they did not really engage with realities as deeply, as critically as these plays would. So in this lecture, we have talked about the themes which are common to the plays around this time: political, philosophical, and the idea of the absurd. And then, of course, we also looked at the different plays that were discussed through the course of this lecture series, where we looked at the post-war drama written by the playwrights. Thank you.